What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Forward Progress live here on the Forward Progress YouTube channel. It is the Week 15 Best Bets edition, part of the Hammer Betting Network, and powered by Pinnacle Sportsbook. It's a new crew this week, everyone. Suma not around today. Eric Eager not around today. So we welcome in ClevTA, cleveanalytics.com, Adam Chernoff, Right Angle Sports, familiar faces, or in the case of Cleve, familiar avatar, I would say.
Sure.
I only see three.
Yeah, we see three people, but there are four here. And of course, we did have to invite Hitman back again this week. At this point, the lines are moving in the opposite direction of Hitman's best bets. Not live on the show just yet. I'm waiting for that. When that happens, Hitman, it's officially time to hang him up, I think.
There's somebody that can just one click at Pinnacle or any of these big shops. Like it's it might be $10,000 it'll cost, but it'll be a great moment. So if anybody wants to click that and do it, it'll give us a good laugh.
Can we do a countdown like Adam, you guys do at Raz, and just have
for the other side
on the Hitman and see how it moves?
Oh man, it might just be worth it for me to click it one day, Hitman, just so that we could say that it happened. So that we could say it happened. But no, hopefully you do get your best bet this week. And although I don't know, that means a lot of people in the chat are going to lose if that's the case. So we have to balance that out as well. For those who are new here and they don't know, it's the first time you're seeing this show, we're going to cover 4 games this week. 2 of those games are on Saturday. 2 of those games are on Sunday. They're not the prettiest games, but they are NFL games that we have opinions on and want to chat about. So we don't always pick the best games, but ones that we have opinions on. We are going to cover a 5th game today, and we're going to put that to a fan vote. It's up right now. Your options are Jets, Dolphins, Cowboys, Bills, Ravens, Jags. If we get to 100 likes on the live stream, we will throw one of those games in as well as our 5th game for today. And then, of course, we end the show with a best bet from each and every one of us. Now, before we get into it this week, it's important that we're transparent here. We do review every single week. Last week, for best bets, Suma and Eric, both of whom are off this week, nailed their best bets in the Chargers-Broncos game. Eager hits the under. Market resisted that one, but he got it anyway. Suma with the Broncos. I get the luckiest push of all time. Thank you very much for the pooch punt, Kevin O'Connell, on the Raiders +3. Hitman, I don't know anymore, man. I mean, maybe Tommy DeVito heard you call him Danny DeVito in your breakdown last week, and that made its way to him. I don't even know what to say, man.
Let's just get to the leans. Let's focus on the leans. Let's move on.
Right. Let's do that. It was an incredible week for our other opinions, though, as we do check out the Leanser board, which we have here every single week as well. We talked heavily about the Rams +7.5, the Bears, the Bucks Falcons over, the Colts Bengals over, and overall we were a combined 12-0 as a group, not losing a single lean last week. I think Hitman was actually 3-0 on the show, but he gets docked because we do actually have an official record keeping sheet that we keep behind the scenes, and he did not input his lean properly in that sheet. So we just have to go with the 2-0 for you, Hitman.
You won more leans than Hitman has lost all season.
You got to do something to shut down my streak. You know, I gave producer Jason a hard time, but I told him review the tape. Colts Bengals was a lean play, whatever you want to call it of mine. Doesn't count in the official stats, but got to do something to keep me under 70%, right?
Well, listen, I will take ownership of the show structure this year where I asked everyone for a best bet, because that's what the people want. When I say the people want, I mean like the YouTube algorithm where we're putting our content out. The word best bet, cutting those into individual segments, they just hit home harder. Had we just maybe given everyone like a gold, silver, bronze, the leaderboard would look a lot different, and Hitman wouldn't be the laughing stock of gambling Twitter basically right now. But this is where we're at.
It changes this week.
It does. Hopefully it changes this week, because I actually know Hitman's best bet right now, and I agree. So hopefully it changes this week. Let's start with Saturday. The Cincinnati Bengals. Jake Browning looking pretty solid, taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Now, Browning's won 2 games. for the Bengals after filling in for injured Joe Burrow after losing the first one against the Steelers. Beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 34-31. Beat the Colts 34-14. Putting up big numbers in the process. The Vikings last week, not as impressive as a win. That might be the understatement of the year. 0-0 deep into the fourth quarter. They end up pulling out the win 3-0. Kevin O'Connell benches Josh Dobbs in favor of Nick Mullins, who's expected to get the start this week. Right before we got on air today, maybe about half an hour before, Justin Jefferson says he's going to return after going to the hospital with a chest injury from last week, getting drilled by Marcus Epps in that game. And Hitman, let's get things started with you. Current market price at Pinnacle right now, Vikings plus 3.5, minus 120. Total in the game is 39.5. Break it down for us. What do you make of this one between the Vikings and the Bengals?
Yeah, so this is on the move a little bit. In the last hours, Justin Jefferson basically said that he's going to play in this game, but still looking in Minnesota's direction. I think that one thing that's been not talked about enough with the Vikings is just how good this defense has been playing recently. If you look at since week 6, they're second in DVOs defensively. Since week 4, I can't even believe, looking some of this stuff up, they're first in EPA per play on defense since week 4. It just doesn't seem believable considering the talent that we thought that they had coming into the year. But Brian Flores has done a really good job with this unit. Obviously, the Vikings are a heavy zone blitz team. We haven't seen Jake Browning against this style of defense. In fact, in the games that he's played, he's only faced a zone blitz 7 times. So it's a matchup that we really have no data points on with Jake Browning on how he handles this style of defense that Flores brings to the table. And if you just look at Jake Browning, how he's played for this stretch, has it been impressive? Yes. Have we upgraded what we thought of Jake Browning, which was very little 3 weeks ago? Of course we've upgraded him. But a league high 35% of his passes have been at or behind the line of scrimmage. Just 10% of his passes have been 15 yards or further downfield, which is only ahead of Aiden O'Connell over the last 3 weeks. So I'm just not ready to say yet that he is this quarterback, a good NFL starting quarterback. And he's kind of getting priced, or the Bengals at least are getting priced as this is at least an average to above average offense. When you consider the difference between these two defenses, the Bengals have been one of the worst defenses in the NFL throughout the entire season. So you're really saying with this line that Cincinnati's offense is not just better, and they are better, but you're saying that they are significantly better. And I just don't know if I'm ready to get to that point with Jake Browning yet. And one thing with Nick Mullins, listen, do I think Nick Mullins is a good NFL quarterback? No. I mean, I think that he's probably just an okay backup, but he has shown to at least be functional in the NFL. In his first 13 starts, I couldn't believe this stat. He had the 3rd most passing yards of all time. Now, how much of that is Kyle Shanahan's offense?
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with that. But I do think that he is at least functional enough to get the ball in the hands of the playmakers of the Vikings, which it's one of the best big threes of playmakers we'd probably say in the league, with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson. So long way for me to say that I think that Minnesota, maybe just a little bit of value still left, even after the move today.
Yeah, we always got to be careful in evaluating these QBs that played under Shanahan. All those years of Jimmy G being a top 5 EPA quarterback as well in that system don't look so kind to him right now. TA, particularly with his Bengals team in the market in the last couple of weeks, they've taken game day money, and pretty heavy game day money once against the Jags. Bettors were rewarded for that, whoever played them on game day. Last week as well, driving it all the way up to -3 against the Colts. Again, bettors were rewarded for that. Do you think this has gone a little bit too far now, though, TA, in terms of how the market is valuing Cincinnati in this game?
Yeah, and I agree with Hitman, too. I do think that, unfortunately, with his best bet, I'm on the Vikings as well at this number. And I think you hit on a lot of the good points. And the thing with Mullins is, he has proven to at least be able to be competent at times, even when outside of the Shanahan system. He spot started for the Browns a couple of years ago. There was a big COVID game that was delayed, I think, a few days against the Raiders. If you remember that random Monday night, he stepped in had no weapons around him. I think DPJ and Rashard Higgins were his top 2 receivers, and they were actually winning before a final drive by the Raiders. So he got them in position. Week 18 last year against the Bears, he did play a full half, went 11 for 13. So like he has shown, even at the end of last week's game, he came right in and was throwing it down the field, and he's got the playmakers. I think TJ Hawkinson's going to have a huge game against this Bengals defense, who really, really struggles against tight ends. So you've got your outlet whenever you need it in case the offensive line, if it breaks down. So he'll have that. And I just think this Bengals defense as a whole is, fairly has got holes in it left and right. And so I think there's plenty of chances for Mullins in this offense to put up some points. And I think, again, the Flores defense is just incredible. Like, not only are they top 5 in EPA over a number of weeks here, but they're only 18th, from great EPA created from turnovers. So like they're not doing it like the Broncos are. So it's actual, pure defensive, success that they're really stifling offenses. And so, they've held their last 6 opponents. It's incredible. Their last 6 opponents have generated a success rate that's been 4th or worst for each of those teams all season. I mean, the last 2 opponents have generated the single worst EPA they've put up all year, and it's been against the Vikings. So he is confusing all of the quarterbacks. He's obviously really good against young quarterbacks. And I think that to get over, if you can get over a field goal, great. I mean, at this point, I think it's 3 and some reduced juice, but I think it's a good number. And I think the Vikings clearly have a shot to win this game. And, the weather is going to be okay in Cincinnati on Saturday. It's supposed to be 50s and clear. So shouldn't be any sort of wind issues. And, Nick Mullins doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, so that could have been an issue, but I think the weather should be fine. So I just think the Vikings are well coached, and they've got the weapon in Brian Flores behind them to win this game outright.
Adam, I noticed you nodding a lot, both while Hitman was talking and while TA was talking. Is it fair to say that you agree with a lot of the points here, or are you looking at this in another way?
I'll go both sides here. So I agree with everything said about Nick Mullins. The San Francisco numbers inflated. I think he gives a higher floor to this Vikings offense. It was clear O'Connell, he didn't want to run Josh Dobbs. 4 designed runs in his starts. A lot of Dobbs running with scrambles. Mullins operates a very similar style to Cousins and how he acts within the pocket. And you just saw that offense look a lot different without Mullins willing to take off when the first read wasn't there against Dobbs like he did against the Raiders in those 2 series that he got. So I think that raises the floor. I guess the counterpoint that I would say, just for the sake of discussion on the Bengals, is when I look at the Vikings defense that has obviously improved, Flores and what he's doing week to week, he goes crazy blitz one week, he dials it way back the next week. He's got very sort of multiple within how he's able to approach these games. But it's Aiden O'Connell, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, Desmond Ridder in this stretch. So it's not like Browning is like a huge step down from kind of the average competition that he has faced. And Rob, on your show with Clive on Sunday night that I was listening to, you mentioned how Browning got away with a lot of screen passes against the Colts and some big plays off of it. And where I kind of have a difficulty with this is, obviously with Burrow, we had a huge ceiling for the Bengals offense, and then there was a big drop immediately for Browning. But I think we're seeing what happens when you take kind of a fringe backup quarterback and you put him around a lot of good playmakers, what could potentially happen. I think these guys around him are kind of elevating this offense up quite a bit, albeit against 2 pretty easy opponents defensively the last couple of weeks. But if I think about how Flores calls defense and how you want to kind of attack that, if those screen calls that the Bengals have been getting right go well, and you're timing it against this blitz-happy Vikings defense, you could find those explosive plays again this week from Cincinnati. And so I think there's 2 sides to it, and it's not just all an immediate fade for me of Browning. Like you said, the Bengals have been bet pretty heavily on game day, and this number isn't too terribly far off from what we saw last week against the Colts. I don't know how big that difference between the Colts and Vikings might be, but I could see both sides here, so I don't think I'm full agreement with Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I subjectively lean Minnesota a little bit. Cottage points this out in the chat. No one's scared of the Vikings O-line injury. So
right tackle,
Dalton Reisner, right tackle Brian O'Neill, Ed Ingram, 3 of their starting 5 offensive linemen on the injury report heading into this week. And we don't know how that's going to play out. Ultimately, I'm just very interested in how the market, kind of how it goes with this game. Essentially, this is my English vocabulary, how it goes. Took me 10 seconds to find a word, and that's what I ended up with. But what's interesting to me about this game in particular is I don't look at a lot of look-ahead lines and stuff like that. I don't bet a week in advance or anything like that, to each their own. But it's been brought to my attention that in a lot of spots, Minnesota was actually favored in look-ahead lines, or they were pick 'em if this game was played a week ago against the Cincinnati Bengals. And there's been a drastic shift over the course of 1 week. And it's not like a major injury shift. Sometimes we see that with a quarterback getting hurt. This isn't like a Dobbs to Mullins super drop-off or anything like that. And just my subjective or like years of paying attention to the NFL market, I tend to notice a lot of times in situations like this where it's not a huge injury move, that the number tends to come back a little bit towards what the look ahead was. However, there's so much love for the Bengals in market right now that I actually don't know how this is going to play out. Subjectively, Vikings play a lot of close games. I know it's like a lazy argument here, but it just feels like getting the hook, even at minus 120, is somewhat valuable in this game, unless we're going to have cluster injuries on the O-line for them.
Do we just have a good group write-up for an over potentially in this? TA mentioned the Hawkinson, the QB upgrade. Is that logical?
But no one's scoring on Minnesota. That's the thing. Like, Flores is just doing a tremendous job. I will say Browning's only been blitzed 27% of dropbacks. It's one of the lowest rates in the NFL so far. I mean, the Colts play a vanilla, like they don't do much defensively to attack the quarterbacks. That was kind of a perfect matchup for him. So I am curious to see how he performs when you kind of get this exotic situation where they're coming after him or, dropping some guys. And the thing about the screen passes, I agree, Adam, but they know it's coming, and they know that, about a third of his yardage last week came on those screens. It's not just an all or nothing. Like they bring some in some positions and they drop others. So I think if they get caught in trying to time those all out blitzes, like it could really hurt them from that position, because you can get a lot of, interceptions, tip passes, etc. But I don't know. I just don't trust anyone to score on this Minnesota team, because no one really is at this point. And the only ones who really have are kind of the veteran quarterbacks, like a Russell Wilson a few weeks ago. But it's hard for me to get there just based on how this defense is playing.
What's the over-under blitz rate, TA, for Flores this week? Percentage?
50%. I think that's I think 50,
really high. Okay.
Honestly, I really do, because it's just, he's gone. I mean, I've seen games where he's in like the 60s earlier in the season. Like, he really will dial it up, and I think he's going to come after I should take a look and break if you bracket it by kind of young quarterback versus veteran. I wonder if there's a big difference there, but he just hasn't seen that yet. So and his ADOT is like third lowest in the NFL too. Like, everything is short for the most part. So and we've got Chase, who's got a little bit of an injury. I don't know how serious it is. He should play, but he might be banged up. I just think it's it's hard to go into a game trusting a defensive coordinator as like your biggest weapon, but he's just continually, time after time, brings it. So that's kind of the route I'm going.
If Browning has a successful game here against this defense, in my opinion, it's time to really think about Browning being solid going forwards. The Jacksonville game was an eye-opener for me, really. And yeah, like ADOT was a little bit low, but he was just hitting, like, he got T. Higgins back, which was he didn't have in the Steelers game. Got him back into the lineup. They were finding space in the secondary. Just hit him all game, like just very accurately move the ball down the field. Last week was a little bit more, I would call it scheme against the Colts, where they kind of schemed their way into the end zone in some explosive plays. This one is the test to me, the ultimate Jake Browning test. Does he have it or not against a coordinator that's really going to try to confuse him? But interesting game here. Sounds like we're at least majority aligned on the Minnesota Vikings being valuable at the current price. Before we get into the next Saturday game, I just want to remind everyone that price shopping, line sensitivity, price sensitivity, it's all extremely important when you're betting the NFL. And because of that, I would never consider betting without Pinnacle as one of my sportsbook accounts, because of their everyday competitive odds. If you use a line comparison tool like BetStamp, you pull up all the odds in your market. Pinnacle is going to have the best price on the side or the total in every single NFL game this week. So bet smart, bet Pinnacle, your trusted sportsbook for the past 25 years, and use code HAMMER when signing up, as it does help support us here on Forward Progress. You must be 19 plus, not available in the US. And as always, please play responsibly. All right, keeping it moving here. Saturday night game. I don't know what I'm going to tell my wife this week when she realizes 3 football games are on Saturday, but she's about to come to a harsh reality at some point in the very near future here. The Detroit Lions hosting the Denver Broncos in the primetime game. Both teams trying to get a playoff berth. Denver is rejuvenated here in the second half of the year. They're within 1 game of the AFC West lead right now after beating the Chargers last week. Courtland Sutton with another unreal touchdown grab in the end zone in that game. He's really come a long way. The Lions, on the other hand, a team trending in the other direction, upset by the Chicago Bears 28-13 last week. Jared Goff was brutal, 161 yards, which was a season low for him, 2 interceptions in the loss as well. TA, I'll start with you on this game here. Market at Pinnacle right now is the Lions laying 4.5 plus 103. That's basically like a number between 4 and 4.5 right now at Pinnacle Sportsbook. Total in the game is 48. TA, do you view this as potentially being a good bounce back spot here for the Lions?
Yeah, and it's right. It's kind of right on my number, but I think it's worth taking a strong look at, or maybe even if you wanted to get them just to win, you could kind of combine them with a money line parlay. If you wanted to add the Chiefs and the Niners and kind of get it under 110, you could do that. But I do think that I've been fading this Denver team just because I don't believe in kind of especially their defense. Obviously, there's a strong disconnect between some of the success rate numbers and their EPA purely based on turnovers. We even saw it last week early in that game, a tip pass at the line and they get an interception inside the 5-yard line, turns into a touchdown. They really didn't do much else. I think they had one other scoring drive of field goal while Herbert was in the game, but then they get Easton Stick in the second half. Prior weeks, they got PJ Walker and DTR for one game. They had Josh Dobbs for another. The only kind of real quarterback they've faced in the last month has been CJ Stroud. And that was a game that, Houston won and covered and had a big lead, even lost Tank Dell in that game while they're up multiple scores. And so, it's just one of those things where they've caught every break. I will give Sean Payton credit. He is managing Russell Wilson in this offense in a way where he's limiting the mistakes. It's either, run the ball, dump it off to your running backs, or take a deep shot with Courtland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, who likely will drop a pass. But it's kind of like it's a low risk type of offense and it's working. So you got to give him credit for handling his roster the right way. But I still don't think that this defense, barring those turnovers, could really hold down a good offense in the Lions. And we'll say, the Lions clearly are struggling of late, especially Jared Goff, but it has been his 3 worst games have been in division for whatever it's worth. So it's not like, the Saints were one of his better games all year within the last few weeks, and that was out of division. So maybe it's something about, the familiarity or the types of defenses that, especially the Bears run, that makes it difficult for him. But, they're clearly nervous to put the ball in Jared Goff's hands. I mean, if you look at some of the neutral game pass rates, like they are running it at a much higher rate now than they were earlier in the season. I mean, they've gone 53%, 39% pass rates the last 2 weeks when they were more like in the 60s and 70s or, towards the middle of the season. So I think they are a little bit nervous with Jared Goff having the ball in his hands, and they just want to limit those mistakes and run the ball. And you can run the ball on this Broncos defense. It's bottom 10 in most categories. So I think if they can get out to a lead, Denver is playing their third road game in a row, and it's a short week, which is a rarity. I looked it up. I think in the last 20 plus years, it's only happened a handful of times where the third game of a 3-game road stretch has been on a short week. So you expect to see some, weary legs from the Broncos, especially in the second half. So if Detroit can get out early, maybe they go no huddle, maybe Ben Johnson creates some scoring opportunities early. Use that run game to their advantage in the second half, force Denver to get out of their comfort zone and actually throw the ball around the yard like they had to do against Houston. It's a lot harder for them to do that and come back. I think that the Lions, at least to win the game is worth a look. But I do think as this number starts to tick back down to kind of the 4 range, I think it's kind of in range to take a look at from a side perspective.
Yeah, Adam, we've seen some movement on this game over the course of the week. All the early money towards the Lions pushed it up to 5 at Pinnacle at one point yesterday and today. A little bit of buyback on the Broncos now. And I think there's honestly, I mean, just looking at our chat right now, it's a very divisive type of game where people can make arguments for both teams. Cleve made an argument for playing the Lions on the money line here and putting in like another big favorite this week to get them at a good price. What are you making of the Lions and what they've looked like over the course of the past couple weeks?
I think Lions at 4 is a pretty easy decision this week to make in taking them. I agree with a lot of what TA said, and I wanted to be the sort of devil's advocate here for a lot of these, but I'm in step with a lot of that. I think last week was pretty telling to me. The big worry for Detroit last week, and I think a lot of the reason folks were advocating for Chicago, loss of Ragnow up front at center, and the Bears defense improving significantly over the last 8 weeks, have been very good against the run all season. Detroit was able to still run the ball without Ragnow at center, had both guys in the backfield over 60 yards. And I look at what the Broncos defense has done, not only, like TA mentioned, bottom 10 in terms of defending the run, but like last week against the Chargers, Eckler was written off by people were comparing him to Eddie Lacy. He comes out, has a strong game. The week prior, Houston couldn't get anything going on the ground for a couple weeks. Both guys have a big game. You have Cleveland the week prior going through O-line changes, big game on the ground. Minnesota hadn't scored a running touchdown. They had like 1 or 2 through 8 weeks. They had a big game on the ground in prime time. Buffalo too with Cook. Big, like teams that don't have great top level ground games have been able to move it on the Broncos defense all season. It's not like it's been heavily influenced by schedule. So I think the Lions catch a break there. And then you have the Goff home road splits. You have a Broncos team that doesn't play a lot of this cover 2 style defense that Goff has been struggling with. And when they do, success rate near the bottom of the league, 31st in terms of their 2 high shell looks, the Broncos are this season. So I think there's a lot of signs that point to a Lions bounce back. And I would say one last thing, just price-wise, the Lions have been inflated at big numbers all season long. And like last week, we finally really saw that number come in a ton as the week went on. To me, this has been adjusted down to a point where it's probably a fair price on the Lions for the first time in a number of weeks. And so to me, Saturday night, easy decision on the Lions.
Yeah, I'm with you for a lot of those reasons as well. And I think with, in particular, the amount of cover 3 that Denver plays and how Goff has just consistently beaten that over the course of his career with like insane EPA numbers, success rate numbers. I think this is a matchup very conducive to the Lions getting back on track, especially when you consider the last 3 weeks as well. Adam, you mentioned that they did run the ball well against Chicago last week, but last 3 games, Chicago, New Orleans, Chicago, those are games where the opposing rush defense is top 10 EPA or top 7 success rate. And now they get the Broncos, which are at the bottom end of the scale on both of those and can't stop the run. I love the Detroit offense so much more when they're just able to do what they want, basically, and run the ball successfully, open up play action. I think it's a very good matchup for Detroit's offense. I think it's a slightly short price, personally, on the Lions. Looks like we're all leaning one way, except Hitman. You're more neutral on the game, or just don't really have a case to be made.
Yeah, don't really have a case to be made right now. Just one thought that I just wanted to add to it is that the over has been taking money in a lot of Detroit games recently, and like they profile as a team good offense, and at defense it's been absolutely terrible. And last week the Denver game took over money also. And it took money, I believe, against Houston as well. So a lot of these Denver games have been getting bet over, but I'm interested to see how high this total actually gets, because Detroit's kind of been open. If you read like some of the beat writers over the past few weeks, they've been talking about getting back to their run game, and Jared Goff has been struggling the past few weeks. Now, I know some of that was matchup dependent, but he has been struggling a little bit. They've been talking about getting back to the run game. Denver is obviously a run funnel of a defense. They do have a shutdown corner that they can put on the Lions, one good wide receiver to potentially limit him a little bit. So I think we could see a decent amount of Detroit running the ball. And then if you look at Denver on offense, they've thrown the ball 5% below expectation since week 6. And they've been one of the most conservative offenses in the NFL. So I do think that there is a path to where we see both teams maybe go a little bit more conservative than the market thinks running the ball. And as I do think that at least on the Detroit side, they can run the ball very efficiently. But remember, that does take a lot of clock. It turns a lot of drives into double-digit play drives where you stall in the red zone. You could be killed on an over. So no real opinion on the game, but just wanted to add thoughts on the total, which has been getting bet up.
All right. Those are our thoughts on the Saturday primetime game. Before we get into Sunday here, just want to remind everyone, we do have a poll up here on YouTube right now for a fifth game that we'll discuss. If you do want to get us to the fifth game, just make sure you like the stream down below. 100 plus likes will get there. I think we're only about 10 likes short right now. So make sure you like the stream. If you're new here on Forward Progress, hit that subscribe button down below as well. If you're listening after the fact, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast app. All right, getting into the Sunday games here. Cleveland Browns continue forward with Joe Flacco as their quarterback. He's going to be their quarterback for the remainder of the season. Kevin Stefanski announced after he got the 31-27 win over the Jags last week. 311 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns. The Browns defense sacked Trevor Lawrence 4 times, picked him off 3 times as well when they returned home in that game where they've been a lot better so far this season. The Bears, they got a big statement win against the aforementioned Detroit Lions. Justin Fields, 19-33, 223 yards and a touchdown, but he was also their leading rusher with 58 yards and a touchdown score on the ground. Taking a look at the market right now at Pinnacle, Browns laying 3 -117. Total in the game is 38. Adam, I'll start with you here. A lot to break down in this game. 2 teams that have, I would say, drastically changed over the course of the season. How are you looking at this one between the Browns and the Bears?
I'm really struggling with what to make of the Bears because there's so much talk about the defense, and I don't know if I fully believe the numbers that they're rated at being the full case of the truth for what they are going to be going forward down the stretch. I thought that what Detroit did on the ground to them was pretty telling, and I'm going to be curious to see now that they're facing a Browns team that is throwing the football so much more with Flacco. To me, the offensive identity has changed quite a bit, and what Stefanski has been able to do despite all of these injuries up front and rotating guys around, I think has been pretty impressive with Flacco coming in and raising that floor. Are the Bears going to be able to hold up in this spot going on the road? I have concerns there with it. And I look at like some of these games that have boosted up the Bears schedule against Minnesota with Dobbs. They had a game against Carolina with Young at home on the short week. They played the Saints as they were going through QB issues. It's just not a lot. And they match up so well with Goff in this Lions passing game that to me, I think if anything here within this game, the Bears defense is a little bit inflated and getting to a level that I think is too high for what this team and unit actually is now that it's fully healthy. And so I don't know if I can comfortably be laying the number again with Cleveland like them last week. But I do think that this is a pretty tough spot for Chicago. Little concern here with what Fields can maybe do on the ground against this Browns defense, which can definitely be run on from the QB spot. So just not sure, but I really think that this Bears defense a little overrated.
Adam leaning, I guess, slightly towards the Browns there, just on the fact that maybe we're overvaluing the Bears defense in market. Hitman, you might have opposing thoughts on this game.
Yeah, so I'm leaning towards Chicago. I think that not much is being made about the Browns' offensive line injuries right now. So obviously they already lost Jedrick Wills and Jay Conklin to injury for the season. Now you lost DeJuan Jones for the season. There's some injury concerns with their center, Ethan Pokic, running Jerome Ford, which I know we always say running backs don't matter, but I think that the difference between explosiveness between Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt right now is a lot. And it's already a team that obviously is missing Nick Chubb from earlier in the year. And it's going against a pretty good run defense. So you're probably going to have to make somebody miss. There's offensive line injuries and you're going against this run defense. So I definitely would monitor that injury. And then you look at their defensive injuries. Myles Garrett, who's playing banged up right now, still a hell of a player, but maybe not 100%. Grant Delpit just went on IR. Their defensive end, TA, you're the Browns expert.
Okonkwo.
Okonkwo, right? That's how we say it.
Okoronkwo. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Bailing me out, TA. Thank you. But yeah, he's going to be out now for this game. And I just look at Cleveland and like just how much of this is sustainable with Joe Flacco right now throwing 5% above expectation during his 2 starts. Like this is a guy, if there's one quarterback in the entire league that you would say is like absolutely dependent upon having good offensive line play and staying clean in the pocket, if he's going to be throwing 5% above expectation, it's Joe Flacco. So I just don't know how much of it is as it is a good story. I don't know how sustainable this run is for him. So leaning towards Chicago.
Adam, I'll let you jump back in there before we get to TA.
I mean, the floor was so low with Walker and DTR that to me, like this in a spot where you have the O-line issues and you have the running back issues, the fact that you now have a serviceable quarterback that can throw and Stefanski is letting throw and what that's led to the last couple of weeks, I think is telling. And I think they could honestly pass a little bit more and still have it sustainable. And I don't know if I fully agree with the Garrett injury. It looked bad a week ago, but it had a solid game as well. So I don't know if he's probably less than 100%, but I still think this is a very good Browns defense. So I don't know if I'm here for the Flacco slander.
Yeah, before we get to TA, actually, and I'd like to get TA's thoughts on this as well, but I watched the Cleveland game in full after the fact, and I found Myles Garrett in that game to be very boomer bust, where he wasn't like a disruptor for the entire game. I'm not suggesting like taking plays off or snaps off, but it seemed to me that he was in there on a lot of plays. He caused a lot of hurries. Looks like in the chat, the exact numbers there, 3 hits and 4 hurries last week, which was noticeable, but there was actually a lot of plays where he wasn't very noticeable either. So I'm not sure he's fully there yet, but for those that don't know, the ClevTA stands for Cleveland. He is a Browns fan. And I think an impartial one as well. He does pick a lot of Browns games pretty regularly with his service, either for or against them. I'm very curious what you think this week, TA, in terms of this matchup against the Bears.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion either way. I think 3 is fine.
Break the divide. Come on.
No, I mean there's varying ways to look at it. I mean, on one end, yeah, you've got all these injuries, especially on defense. I think you're not even mentioning, Denzel Ward may or may not be back yet. And then their safety position, Juan Thornhill didn't play last week. Delpit now is out for the regular season. I mean, that's pretty huge for them. And I'm not as worried about like the Okoronkwo injury because you still got Garrett and Zadarius Smith at defensive end. So it's not the end of the world. There's more, he was rotating in. It's more kind of their NASCAR package on third downs, which hurts, but you can live with that. They lost Maurice Hurst, who's another guy who's playing really well in defensive tackle. And then offensively, I wouldn't worry too much about the Pochik injury as much because Nick Harris is plenty fine at center as a backup. He was actually supposed to be the starter prior to last season. He got hurt during their first preseason game. And he's played pretty well in spot duty this year. So that wouldn't be as much of an issue. And then the tackles are an issue, but they've played. James Hudson and Jerron Christian have filled in the last couple of weeks. So they've been there. It's not like it stinks that DeJuan Jones, who's having a great rookie year, is not able to come back, but they have been playing the last couple of weeks. So it's not as much of a shuffling of the line in 1 week as you might see, in other situations. It's just that the domino effect of all of these injuries, especially on defense in the secondary, one day is going to bite them. But you guys mentioned the Flacco. I mean, their pass rate is just skyrocketed. They've gone from 27th in the NFL to second in neutral game pass rate under Flacco. And clearly Stefanski trusts Flacco to air it out and kind of run his offense. To be honest, that Deshaun Watson does not necessarily fit the type of offense that Stefanski likes to run per se. I mean, he came from Minnesota originally, so he likes that under the center kind of standard, pure drop back quarterback, and it's working. So yeah, he's not going to be perfect, but I think that he's doing just fine. I don't know. I mean, I think there's plenty of reasons to like both sides. I mean, Justin Fields, can you really take advantage at all of this defense in the secondary. I mean, no quarterback holds the ball like Justin Fields, and you can't do that against this pass rush. What the last couple of weeks, you see Trevor Lawrence and Matthew Stafford, what they did to be successful when they were successful is get the ball out quick. Their time to throw was really, really quick. And you don't get that with Justin Fields. So I don't know if he could take advantage at all of the Browns' issues in the secondary. So, we'll see. I mean, he can probably break a run or two just because if he gets past that pass rush to be really aggressive, you can break free. And the Browns have allowed a ton of explosive runs because of that. But I don't know if the offense is consistent enough to take advantage. So I think 3 is fine. I don't see really an advantage one way or another from that perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think for Fields, this is a game where he probably has a low success rate, but can actually have some pretty big explosive plays, especially in the running game. If you look at the defenses that Justin Fields has historically played very well against, those are defenses that play a high rate of man coverage. And that tends to allow him to do a little bit more scrambling than normal, especially once defenders turn their back to the quarterback. He struggled against heavy zone defenses, and we know that the Browns play man at the highest rate in the entire league right now. So I'm not suggesting he's just going to tear up this defense. I don't actually think Fields is really capable of that against good defenses, but I do think that we will see some explosive plays out of him in this game and some deep shots as well to DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney. Our 4th game on the docket here is the Packers and the Bucks. Now, before we get into that game, we've been doing a little trivia competition over here at the Hammer. TA booked his ticket to the finals last week. It was a 3-round victory over G-Stack George. He awaits in the finals the winner of the other semifinal, which is going to be between Hitman, who, contrary to popular belief from the chat, actually has a lot of football knowledge. Hitman taking on Eric Eager in the other semifinal. You can catch that matchup dropping on Friday afternoon over on the Hammer HQ. If you're not subbed to the Hammer HQ YouTube channel, make sure you do so. After the show, head over there, click that subscribe button. I'm incredibly biased, but I think that these competitions have been very enjoyable to be a part of and to check out after the fact as well. So Hitman and Eric Eager this week. Chernoff.
Are there odds on that?
Yeah.
What's the number?
Well, it was, let's just say there was a poor opener on that matchup where Eager opened like minus 120 and 99% of the bets came in on Eric.
It might not be, there's not many people, and I say this in the politest way possible because I love Eric, but there might not be many bigger football nerds than Eric. He's up there, and I'm the underdog for sure. But
his immaculate grid performance is insane.
He made me want to stop doing immaculate grid. I don't do it anymore.
It's not
because
fun.
of
No,
it.
I agree.
It's not even fun. It's just like you're comparing yourself to someone else. Yeah, I mean, listen, no disrespect to Hitman. I think he's actually very, very knowledgeable in the NFL. But Eager minus 200 is, I mean, there might even be value in that number. We'll see on Friday. All right, Bucks and Packers. Packers returning home to Lambeau after a pretty embarrassing primetime loss. 24-22 against the New York Giants. Matt LaFleur's first December loss in his tenure in Green Bay. And it came at the hands of Tommy DeVito, or as Hitman calls him, Danny DeVito. 3 turnovers for the Packers after not turning the ball over on their previous 32 drives. The Hitman Hitman effect right there. We'll call that one right there. I'll let you be Hitman. That's enough for the show today. I know I've gone in on you a little too much, but I saw your caption and I had to. Tampa Bay, 2-game winning streak within the NFC South. They beat the Panthers 2 weeks ago. They beat the Falcons 29-25. Baker Mayfield, couple touchdowns, brought his team back from behind last week against Atlanta. And Hitman, I do want to start with you here, taking a look at the current market. Packers -3, -118. Total is 42 in the game. Green Bay let you down on Monday night. Is this a game where you consider going back to the well with them?
Well, you remember last week, Rob, when we were talking about the Atlanta-Tampa Bay game, we said, we're like, maybe Atlanta, if the Tampa injuries end up being bad, or maybe we end up looking at the over if the Atlanta injuries on defense are bad and the Tampa injuries on defense stay bad. it's kind of like the same mindset that I could see myself getting involved with the over, or I could see myself getting involved with Green Bay in this one. And it's really just all about the injuries right now. Green Bay, we have to monitor their cluster injuries at wide receiver. Jaden Reed's a little bit banged up. Dontavian Wicks looks like is going to miss this game. And I would probably bet on Darren Waller, a.k.a. Christian Watson, missing this game for Green Bay as well. And then Aaron Jones, who knows? I mean, Green Bay is historically one of the most conservative medical staffs in the league. So, like, even if they do play a guy like Aaron Jones, who knows how much he ends up seeing the field. I remember when they brought him back a little bit early against Detroit early in the season on that Thursday night, he ended up barely playing in the game before he ended up getting re-injured in the third quarter. So I'm monitoring the Green Bay injuries. And then there's also some injuries on defense with Green Bay, with Jari Alexander, Wyatt on the defensive line, Darnell Savage. And then we look at the Tampa side with their defense. It feels like for the last 3-4 weeks, we've been talking about their injuries. Is Vita Vea going to play? Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, Ryan Neal, Devin White. So, you know, it's just one of those games I could see if the injuries break Green Bay's way, we maybe end up looking at them. If the injuries break towards Green Bay's offense and against Tampa's defense, and Green Bay still has defensive injuries, maybe we look towards the over. It's just going to be a game to monitor the practice reports. But I'll also say that Tampa, the last 2 weeks, I mean, Baker Mayfield, back-to-back 14 of 29 passing performances against Carolina and Atlanta. Tampa lost the yards per play, 6.3 to 4.3 to Atlanta last week. So some concerning things out of Tampa Bay a little bit with how Baker Mayfield's played the last 2 weeks. But as I said, it's just going to be a week that I'm monitoring injury reports on this game.
Got it. Fair enough. Adam, I know you have some thoughts on this game as well.
Yeah, trying to decide if now you can get back involved with Green Bay. That price that they were laying against New York was kind of silly, and that was just crazy inflated after that Kansas City game that we saw them win in prime time, following the Thanksgiving game that everybody saw as well. And now we're kind of leveling back out a little bit. Injury stuff, obviously important. Hitman nailed both sides of it. What I kind of wonder here on that Baker Mayfield point, the game last week against Atlanta, the Falcons were down their nose tackle on the defensive line. That defensive line for Atlanta has been beat up a little bit the last couple weeks too. And we saw what happens when the Buccaneers kind of get bailed out with their excessive runs on early downs, and they're able to turn it into something because of what Atlanta was dealing with up front and how that's trended. And like, I think about Joe Barry's defense, like back to that Kansas City game, but we've seen it all season where they just concede those runs underneath. They don't actively work to defend them. It's just the defensive scheme that they have, and they really work to prevent the explosive play. And so I think the Buccaneers can kind of get their way back into that game plan where they have success with those runs, and that alleviates some of the issues that Mayfield has been having. I don't know when Godwin gets back involved with this offense at the full level. It was supposed to be last week, based on all the subjective evidence in the world that you could ever have. And it took plays late in that game to get receptions over and get the yardage over as well. So it's really tough to gauge, because there was, like, out of that San Francisco game, Rob, I know you noted it too. Like, that was a game against a great defense where we saw the Buccaneers as that chase team and what they could look like when Mayfield's allowed to throw it and push it downfield, and how effective they can be to driving the total as like a partner to it, getting it over. But now we've seen them kind of in these last couple of weeks really take steps back. And so I wonder if this becomes a bit of a run-heavy game plan, which keeps me a little bit weary of that total. I thought, looking at this, 41.5, 42 last week with the Buccaneers got bet up and closed nearly 44. I'm thinking that this is a better spot with the Packers as a partner, but you just kind of look at how this Packers defense lines up against this Bucs offense, and maybe we see things a little bit tighter than what they were last week. So a tricky one, but that's really injuries. And then what are you going to get from the Buccaneers offense, run or pass? More so driving the game plan is going to dictate this total.
Yeah. One interesting thing that I found, and I was going through the Bucs schedule this week, and then I I kind of just started going through all these teams that play each other in the NFC South, which in my opinion are not very good teams. I don't think people would argue that. Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. When these teams have gone out of division this year, they look horrendous. And we've just seen Tampa Bay back-to-back weeks play a divisional opponent where they might look a lot more competent than I think maybe they actually are. I'm with Hitman here. I'm very closely monitoring this Packers injury report and looking for some positivity. But even if we don't get it, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if we get Christian Watson ruled out, Jair Alexander ruled out, the market will probably shift towards Tampa off of that news regardless. And I think I might just still bet Green Bay at a more favorable price at that point. So I lean heavily to Green Bay in this game. TA, let's get your thoughts here. I don't know if you have any strong opinion one way or another.
I don't. I think everyone kind of hit the key points. It's just, I mean, every week I get a headache trying to pay attention to the Green Bay injury report. It's like they can't go 1 week without having like 5 guys that are important that you have to monitor to see whether they're going to play or not. It's pretty ridiculous. But I just think I had Tampa last week, and I felt pretty fortunate to win and cover. Like Baker Mayfield was pretty terrible in that game. He had a great last drive. He had a couple of really nice throws, but in general, like he was pretty awful. They couldn't really get anything going. It was just a matter of Desmond Ridder turning the ball over. I mean, fumbling, in the end zone and throwing a terrible interception to Carlton Davis inside their own 10. But otherwise, like Tampa didn't do much to really, they couldn't get Mike Evans involved at all. So, that was a little bit of a smoke and mirrors type of win. So I think it does offer a little bit of value on the Packers coming off of that loss to the Giants, where everybody saw how bad they looked last week to a team they probably should have won against. So I would tend to lean towards the Packers. Again, you're right. I don't think you need to get everybody back. I just think it would be nice to have a piece or two back, especially Aaron Jones. Like that offense, A.J. Dillon's just such a plotter, and he doesn't do anything in the pass game. It's like it just Aaron Jones adds so much to that offense, both in the pass game and in the run game, that it opens things up. So, I mean, even just having him back would be nice, to be honest. So if I had to take a bet, it would be Green Bay's side. But right now, I don't have any opinion.
Rob, question for you. If Love's performance against New York was kind of bottom, we put that at 0, and Love's performance against Detroit was 100. What is Love's actual range here? Like, what is he more closer to the 100 or the 0?
Well, I think he's closer towards the 100 just based off the way that the Tampa Bay defensive injuries could play out as well. Obviously, we have to monitor Carlton Davis, Ryan Neal. I mean, even having linebackers there. I mean, Jamel Dean, of course. Like everyone on the Bucs defense, it's like half the defense is on the injury report in some capacity. So that just gives you the opportunity. Even a guy like Vita Vea being out and you're able to run the ball much more successfully, that opens things up way more for the Packers offense. But generally speaking, I don't think highly of the Bucs defense. I think it's a good bounce back spot for Jordan Love here.
Well, the thing with the Bucs defense is their starters are fine. It's actually solid, right? They've got some good players. They have no depth. Like once you start getting, especially in the secondary, like they've got nobody past Dean and Carlton Davis that is quality, or at least replacement level. Like it's really bad.
Not a Zion McCollum fan.
No. I know he ran a fast 40 at the combine. I think but that's about it. Like they have nobody. So once those guys, especially those linebackers and the veteran corners, start going down, like you just have nothing behind them. So they amongst all those teams, a lot of the teams out there, their depth is really an issue, and it makes sense. It's an older roster. It's, it was a high price roster with Brady when he was there, and they just, didn't get a chance to really replenish things. So, their depth really takes a hit pretty quickly. So, monitoring like the starters versus the drop off to the backups is a big deal for them.
All right. Those are our thoughts on the 4 games that we have covered, 2 Saturday, 2 Sunday. I did promise the fan vote game, we needed 100 likes on the live stream. We did get there, but we could get more. If you haven't liked the stream yet, just make sure you smash that like button down below. In a whopping 61%, we will be covering the Dallas Cowboys and the Buffalo Bills as our final game of the stream. And then we will get into our best bets really quickly. But this is a big time matchup, and people are really starting to buy into the Buffalo Bills. and the possibility of not only getting into the playoffs, but possibly winning the division because of what the Dolphins are dealing with right now. So a huge swing game one way or the other. Cowboys are making a case for a Super Bowl contender right now. 5th straight win. It was a dominant win over the Eagles. Dak Prescott making a case for the MVP market as well. Right now, things are pretty rosy in Dallas. And Buffalo, what can you say? I mean, sure, offensive offside, that was a penalty that mired, a great performance by the Bills to go on the road at Arrowhead and win the game ultimately, but they're back in the mix of things here. So looking at the market here, it's kind of been back and forth. Early money came in on the Bills. Today, there was some buyback on the Cowboys. Presumably, that was the Bills' injury report, especially on defense. And now a little bit more money ticking back towards Buffalo here. We've settled in at Buffalo -2.5 plus 100. Total in the game has been bet up to 50.5 right now. I'll start with UTA on this one. Cowboys have been very dominant at home this year. On the road, a little bit of a different story. Do you think that plays a factor here in Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the perception of Dallas, which, by the way, I had them going to the Super Bowl before the season started, so I do appreciate, how they've played, and I like the roster. But, I just think, they played 3 games at home in a row. They faced a bunch of, even before that, their last road game was at Carolina, so the worst team in the NFL, which, by the way, they were only up, I think, 7 early in the third quarter before pick 6 kind of opened up that lead. But they've had kind of a little bit of a cruise control over the last month or so of the season. And a lot of that's come at home against bad pass defenses. They have not faced a single top 14 EPA pass defense since week 5 against the Niners, which is just incredible to think about. Like, they've just played the stream of poor pass defenses, and they've done to their credit, they've dominated pretty much all of them. But they just haven't been tested much at all, and they haven't gone on the road and really faced a difficult circumstance like they will in Buffalo. And late afternoon will be, the weather should be okay, but it's still gonna be chilly. It's not perfect kind of dome conditions that they're used to. And the last time they had to do that was really Philly. About a month and a half ago, they lost and didn't cover that game. They were down double digits, midway through the fourth before, rallying and at least having a shot to win late. But, their 2 road games between that one and San Francisco, where they lost 42-10, where Dak Prescott had the single lowest EPA that any quarterback has generated against this Niners defense all year. So he not only failed that test, but he fell flat on his face. They have not necessarily dominated on the road. I mean, they eked out a 3-point win against the Chargers in LA, which is not really is that even a road trip at that point? Like, it's more Cowboys fans in that game. They lost by double digits to Arizona on the road. They looked terrible in that game. They allowed the highest yards per play that Arizona has generated all year in that game. Like, it doesn't seem to me like that they're really the same type of team on the road versus a home. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's a road home thing, but it's just the comforts of Dallas, of Texas Stadium. And, they just haven't been tested to the degree they will against this Buffalo team. And, defensively, they've got a couple of injuries. Obviously, Micah Hyde, you'd like to have, perfect health here. But in general, compared to where they were midway through the season, where half their defense was out, they're a lot healthier. That Rasul Douglas trade turns out to be one of the most underrated trades, of any team at the deadline, maybe the best trade. I mean, he's been awesome. He's got an 84 PFF coverage grade, and, he kind of solidifies that secondary right now. So, he's been key to keeping things kind of steady. There've been a top 10 pass defense for the last months, or ever since he came to the team. So I think it's going to be a lot tougher test for Dak in this offense. I don't think they're, as dominant as we've seen in this last, 3 or 4 games, especially. And look, Seattle and Philly both put up 6.4 yards per play against this team. It's not like this defense is dominating either. Philly, without those turnovers and just stalling inside the 35, 6 of the first 7 drives got inside the Dallas 35-yard line. It's not like they weren't moving the ball. It's just obviously, some fluky fumbles and, not being able to convert 4th downs that really got to them. But, Seattle moved the ball at will. They had a shot to win that game late. So it's not as if you can't move the ball on this defense. And Josh Allen, historically, he's been a lot better against man-to-man defense, which, Dallas does a lot more of than zone. I mean, 11 of his 13 interceptions have been against zone defense. He's one of the best scramblers against man. So not surprisingly, because when you're with the backs defensive backs are to the quarterback. You've got more running lanes. And so he's scrambled at one of the highest rates of the NFL. Almost 10% of his dropbacks have turned into a scramble against man-to-man defense. And he's, number 2 in EPA per dropback or per scramble in those spots. So I think his legs are going to be fine. I mean, Dallas is one of the worst teams in the NFL when you look at success rate on the ground. So, I think there are avenues for this Buffalo offense to move it against Dallas. I think that, Dak Prescott in this offense is not going to find the same success that they've had, at least as easy of success as they had the last month or so. And I just think that the step up, and it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock stepping up in Buffalo against this team after having kind of an easier 2 months or so. I think it's a good spot for Buffalo, and I think this line really should be more like closer to 3 than the 1.5, 2.5 range we are. So I do like Buffalo here.
Hitman, are you going to do anything with this game in all likelihood on Sunday?
Probably could have picked a game that I just didn't have any thoughts.
Don't want to ruin that lean record, of course.
Exactly. Gotta preserve it. I may not have another lean the rest of the year. But, I mean, I just think we're at a point with the market that we're not seeing 3 minus 120 or anything. It's going to get bet immediately if it goes to that. I would bet that if it went to it. But I don't think we're going to see that. And I don't think we're going to get the favorite to flip either. So I just think that we're at a point where the market's probably going to end up closing similar to what it is now in that 2.5 to 1.5 range. Just not many opinions on this game.
Adam, over to you.
I got talked out of Buffalo I was watching Sunday afternoon Pacific time. So it was like 3:00 when they had the halftime lead going into the third quarter. And I'm in the group chat, Buffalo, got to take them. This is the spot. And the way that game finished for Buffalo against Kansas City was the least confidence inspiring way that game could have played out. That second half for Buffalo was not good. And I'm worried now with Kincaid not 100% and Knox coming back, and how these wide receivers have been so hit or miss every single game that we kind of go back to this version of the Buffalo offense that we didn't want. And there's going to be more focus on Cook, more focus on the traditional ground game, especially if Cowboys defensive line in the middle is banged up. That might be kind of where the Bills go to push and try to sort of exploit this. But just the way that the Bills came out of that game against Kansas City, it worried me a little bit. And just the feel to how this game has been being bet, it kind of like Hitman said, we're kind of stuck in the middle here. It wasn't something that opened. I was expecting pick or maybe Dallas -1 at the opener. And you're like, all right, Buffalo went all the way to the other side of that immediately. And what I'd say about that Cowboys game against the Eagles, they were never pushed in that game at all. There was never an emphasis for them to be as that game went on. I think if they're pushed, they hang 45-50 in that game pretty comfortably. And so now you have these Bills defensive injuries. I don't know. I'm not advocating for Dallas here, but I thought it was going to be all over Buffalo, full confidence coming into this. And I was talked out of it by people much wiser than I. So it's a stay away from me in this spot.
If this total gets up to 51, which seems within the range of realistic now, I'm going to have a conversation with myself about the under. It's going to be scary, obviously, with what these offenses are capable of. But to me, the Bills offense has gone through this transformation where the explosive plays just do not seem to be there. The shot, it's very clear to me in watching Buffalo that they want Josh Allen to protect the ball. And early in the year was all these turnovers. And it's like, dude, you got to stop. And he still makes some plays where he's rolling out to his left. He's barely at the sideline, throws it across the field. He's still going to do that now and then. But they just don't have the explosiveness, in my opinion, that people think that they have. Now, there was the Chiefs defense last week. The Cowboys defense is very different. But at some point, you got to buy a number. And I think 51 is a buy point for me on the under here.
Does the Cowboys cadence and timing travel outdoors on the road and be as effective rhythm-wise as it is at home when everything's comfortable and you're playing with the lead? Is that a concern?
Well, to TA's point, when he broke it down, I don't think we know because we haven't had these situations for Dallas again. Like, it's been just such a run of terrible defenses for the most part, especially in a lot of these road games. But I mean, the last time they faced a defensive test on the road was the Panthers, I guess you would say. And they won the game comfortably, but it was not a great offensive performance by Dallas in that game. They won the game because Carolina was stuck in the mud on offense the entire game.
Their EPA, by the way, their EPA was essentially what Carolina's season averages allowed. Like, it was very middling. It wasn't a dominant performance at all. Like I said, unfortunately, I had Carolina in that game. They were covering early in the third quarter. Like, Bryce Young took them down. It was like an 18-play drive, but it turned out like I think Dallas kicked a field goal and then it was a pick six and the game was over. But it wasn't like some dominating performance, and that's the worst team in the NFL right there. Yeah, I haven't seen them be tested at all. And the two times they were tested, they got blown out by San Francisco. They were down double digits in the fourth quarter to Philly before making that comeback, still losing, not covering. They beat the Chargers without Mike Williams, and that we know the Chargers are not a good offense. They scored 20 points on that team, won by 3. They lose to Arizona by double digits on the road. Like, there's not many examples of, all right, they just went into a tough environment and stepped up their game and really played like we've seen them play in the last month. Like, there's just no evidence that they've done that. I think that getting 3 straight home games, especially a couple on national TV, and just having just incredible matchups where they could just name their score on offense just really inflates our thinking of Dallas. And when you said, Adam, that you thought that Dallas might be a 1-point favorite when it opened, I'm kind of stunned at that. I don't see that at all. Maybe just, I'm trying to remove myself from what we just have seen recently. Like, I thought this would be 2.5, 3. And I was just hoping when I saw it open at 1.5, and I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe it. Buffalo gets a lot of respect in the market. So I think what we've seen recently from Dallas is really inflating their value. Just my opinion. We'll see. Like, we've seen this before. We saw this when Miami went to play in Buffalo early this year. We saw what happened. Like, we see it a lot where, these situations where you kind of have to step up, and you step up in Buffalo is not easy to do. We've seen historically the Bills really come out to play. So it'll be interesting. If Dallas wins this game, like, my thinking of them is really going to change. Like, they're going to clearly be the, number 2 or 3 favorite in the NFL, in my opinion.
Adam, you wanted to jump in there?
I had one last question. The last time we've seen McCarthy have to make like a key late game decision, fourth quarter, in like a stress spot. What was the field goal game? He did something ridiculous. I can't remember.
Seattle. He threw the ball when he should have run the ball and kicked a field goal. He stopped the clock.
So he got away with that. But other than that, this season, like, has he been tested like that late in the game? I can't remember off the top of my head.
They haven't had many close games.
So. Right.
Yeah.
They just haven't. But he did read a lot of books about analytics in the offseason.
Spent the whole offseason training. Right. And so,
I think Eric met with him, right?
Yeah, Eric did. Eric met with McCarthy. I forgot he said that. Yes.
But that's something too that we haven't seen really. You mentioned like Dallas not playing from behind. I see it in the chat too, but there's that late game decision-making element that I think he, for the most part, has been either getting it right or guessing right, or in that case, he did something ridiculous and got away with it. That's something that's been running pretty hot too.
Well, to be fair, he's going up against McDermott, and that's like 2 negatives. 2 negatives equal a positive somewhere.
We'll get one of them making something wrong on almost certainty in the second half.
All right. Before we get into our best bets here, just want to remind everyone, we do live watch-alongs of Thursday Night Football and Monday Night Football every week here on Forward Progress, hosted by myself, where we bring in guests who are sweating bets. We don't always talk football. We sometimes talk other things. It's just a mismatch of a bunch of random stuff, but be sure you check them out. I think it's a great time. A lot of people who are in the chat right now making comments on here would endorse the live watch-alongs. Thursday Night Football this week. Plug your nose. Easton Stick, probably Aiden O'Connell, but we don't know for sure yet. It's Raiders-Chargers Thursday night, and then Monday Night Football, it's the Eagles and the Seahawks. We also don't know who's starting at quarterback for the Seahawks yet, but either way, join me. I'll hand out some prop bets before the game. We will have a good time with it. It's best bets time. As is tradition, we start with last week's winners first. Unfortunately, neither of them are here. So instead, We'll start with the fresh blood first. We'll go fresh blood this week. Adam Chernoff. A lot of pressure. Producer Jason is 1-0 when he stepped in the guest role.
All right.
G-Stack George was 0-1, and he's never going to live it down. So there's a lot of pressure here on you. Who's the best bet going to be, and why?
Okay, so I haven't looked at the screen since I came on. So Colts Steelers over is 42 still fair currently? Is that what the screen is showing?
It's being bet right now, but it's 42 minus 114. It's actually literally being bet right now.
Okay. Anything 43.5 is better. Colts side is pretty straightforward. It's a Shane Steichen over for me in this spot, an angle that I continue to look at and back. From the Steelers side, I think it's an interesting kind of offensive situation they're going through. So they had obviously the play caller change from Canada to Sullivan in week 12 against the Bengals. And so that was the complete switch of the play calling. The route trees were switched. Steelers had a big offensive output, didn't have a big scoreboard reflection of that due to red zone stallouts. You go into week 2 where it was anticipated to build on that. You have the Pickett injury. You have 2 weather delays. The game took nearly 5 hours to play. You have that as a whole reset situation. And you're going into Trubisky on the short week against the New England Patriots defense. It's one of the better units in the league. Now, with the extra time to prepare against the Colts defense, that's a big step down in class. Things get right for Trubisky, get right for Sullivan in this offense as they transition. So it's another offensive reset, but now out of that Pats game with the extra time to prep, I think the Steelers look right and become a good partner for the over. So I'll take over 42 there in that game and keep going with these Steichen overs.
All right. Adam Chernoff on the over in Steelers Colts. Good to 43.5 CC Steve Fezzik on that one. ClevTA, on to you. Best bet and why?
Well, so I just gave it. It's the Bills. I guess I haven't looked. It's what, minus 2.5 now at plus 100. So hopefully McCarthy doesn't go down 4 and go for 2 like Peterson. We might see that more and more in the NFL these days, but I'll stick with the 2.5. You kind of, I just laid it all out, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but I think the situation where the Bills are ready to step up and Dallas, going to step in front of the freight train of this offense and see if they can do it against probably the best defense they've faced in 2.5 months. And I think Josh Allen leads Buffalo to win, to beat in Dallas. So we'll go with the Bills.
All right. Adam on the over in Steelers, TA on the Buffalo Bills. People don't realize the scrambling that goes on behind the scenes here for a live show when stuff's moving in real time and we have to adjust our bets so that it stays current. But Hitman was going to give a game which moved, and now he's pivoted to the game that I was going to take, but I don't want to be on the same side as Hitman for my best bet. So I'm going to pivot in real time as well, which I have done here. I'm going to go to a total. I'm going to take the Commies and the Rams over 49.5 minus 109. I have this lined above 51. It's my favorite total of the week. And this is just the Commanders' defense is bad. We all know that. But I actually think that they're still being somewhat overrated in market because they can't stop anything. They have a horrendous secondary. Their front seven's been a disaster since the trade deadline. I think the Rams' floor here in terms of points is very high, especially now that they have Kyron Williams in the mix. This has completely changed the Los Angeles Rams offense. I mean, look at last week against the Baltimore Ravens and how traditionally that type of game, bad weather in Baltimore, would have suited the Ravens just fine. Rams go in there, they go toe-to-toe with them, they go score for score with them, they lose on a punt touchdown. But I do think the Rams are going to score a lot of points in this. It just matters of whether or not the Commanders can keep up. And I do like Sam Howell against these types of defenses that just don't have a ton of playmakers overall. They'll be playing from behind a lot, changes the game script for them a little bit, and they're forced to throw. But I do like the over in the Rams and Commanders at 49.5. And of course, now the moment that everyone has been waiting for. Hitman, it's time. It's time to go ahead, Adam.
You say this every week.
What happens if the first play he was coming with wins and then this one doesn't? Does he get any like this is going to be an all-time bad? I feel for Hitman in this spot.
It is. This is just like everyone out there in real life. Everyone clicks submit bet themselves. Man. You know, you buy picks, you listen to your friends, you do whatever. At the end of the day, you're clicking that submit bet button, bet yourself. Submit bet button yourself. I've made the choice to pivot to this bet. It's on me. It's not on you, Hitman. But I do agree with your bet. I just didn't want the bad juju associated with being on the best bet. So let the people know what it's going to be and why.
Well, what we're going to do is if the game that I had to pivot off wins, we're going to bring that up next week and say I should have won. And if it loses, we're just not going to mention it. That's how we do it. But all joking aside, Chicago +3 is my best bet. Chicago's defense since week 5 is 5th in EPA. I said earlier that Joe Flacco, I just don't think that it's sustainable what he's been doing with this Browns team. He's throwing at 5% above expectation. Chicago, actually over the last 8 games, is allowing the second least yards per attempt in the league, along with their run defense playing pretty well. We have Cleveland with offensive line injuries. There's some question marks with Jerome Ford. There's some question marks with their defense. And most importantly, Rob Pizzola endorses it. I'm not laying you off the hook, Rob. I know you endorsed this one, so we'll go with Chicago +3 as my best bet.
Can we reveal what the original was? Because I'm actually on the original, and I'm just thrilled right now that
you got to keep it as a landmine for everyone else in the chat. Now they don't know what it is, and everyone has to tread lightly.
Yeah, if you want to fade the original, I bet Minnesota +4 earlier in the week, was at 3.5 all day. That was going to be it. Justin Jefferson had to announce that he's coming back and move it to 3 right before the show. So that was the original. If you want to fade that one, is also.
Well, no, we don't fade those. We back those.
Those are the ones we want. Now that it's not given out as the best bet. It was +3.5 -120 when we were going on air, and it's since +3.5 -131 at Pinnacle. So that's just the way it crumbles sometimes. And we all know that what's happening now. Vikings win, Bears don't. It's let it be written, let it be done. I mean, I've seen it, and this is just the way it's going to happen. Make sure that you check out TA's website, cleveanalytics.com. Make sure you check out Right Angle Sports on YouTube. Follow the stuff that Adam Chernoff is doing. Solid. Make sure you check out this show every week with Hitman. Just if you know the drill by now, people. You know what the funny thing? I'm just going to defend Hitman here for a second before we sign off on.
Rightfully so. Yes.
This is actually one of the best bettors that I know and communicate with on a weekly basis. And the slander towards him, which I've created myself, but in the chat where people are so willing to fade him at this point, has gotten a little bit out of hand.
I said to you earlier in the week, Rob, I was like, I rely on a lot of betting partnerships. I'm betting in a lot of volume during the week. This might be hurting my partnerships that with this reputation that's going around, but we'll keep showing up each week and try to hammer out a win.
It's too bad. This is like the Circa Millions. You could have done like the booby prize where you go for the worst record. This would have been great.
It just never ends. It never ends. Appreciate everyone who tuned in today. This has been Forward Progress, Week 15 Best Bets Edition, right here on the Forward Progress YouTube channel, presented by Pinnacle Sportsbook. Everyone, good luck with your bets this week, and we'll catch everyone next week.